Well, how good it is to see you on this Christmas Eve. Merry Christmas to all of you. This is our first Christmas Eve service in the new sanctuary. We had hoped we would be in it last Christmas, and we missed it by 2 months. But how good to see you. How good to see you. Well, I don't know about you, but I love to watch game shows where I can learn something from them. Jeopardy's one of my favorite. I don't know how many of you watch that. I don't get it every night, but from time to time. And I've learned some interesting things. I did not know that money isn't made out of paper. Do you know what money's made out of? Cotton. How about that? Aren't you glad you came here tonight so you could learn about that? I never knew the Declaration of Independence was written on hemp paper. Do you know what hemp is? Ah. It's a form of marijuana. Bet you didn't think you'd hear that at Christmas Eve service. The dot over the letter I is called a tittle. Women's lipstick primarily is made from fish scales. Remember that when you're putting it on. And chewing gum while peeling onions will keep you from crying. Try that the next time, see if it works. And how about this one? Celery has negative calories. It takes more calories to eat a piece of celery than the celery has in it to begin with. So eat up. Eat up. And I had heard this a long time ago, but I learned it again recently, that Leonardo da Vinci took 10 years to paint the lips of the Mona Lisa. 10 years. How about that? Children like to ask a lot of questions, but the answers to their questions are not as simple as the ones that I just gave you. Who created God? I can't tell you how many parents have called me and said, my child is asking who created God, and I just told them to ask Pastor D after church on Sunday. And I said, thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. Why is the sky blue? How does Santa Claus get down the chimney? We adults love trivia. Trivia is still very prominent in this nation. And we're okay with trivia until something critical happens in our lives and we're not satisfied with trivia anymore. Let me give you an example. The young daughter discovers she's with child. She's not married. The religious group that she is a part of could stone her to death for being in such a situation without being married. Her parents might shun her. The man to whom she's engaged but not married wants to break off the engagement. Her world is falling apart, and the greater world around her is in even worse shape. There's political corruption, high taxes, unfair laws, disease, death, and wars around them. We can relate to that story. It is the story of Mary and Joseph. The world we live in has some similar circumstances. This year we've seen wars, natural disasters, school shootings, perhaps a bad report from the doctor or from the university concerning your child or the school or the bank. We still hear of genocide and wars and rumors of wars. And it's interesting, I've been in the ministry for 36 years, and whenever crisis happens in someone's life, usually the first question that a minister gets, or that I've gotten, is this: where is God? Where is God in this? Is God at work in the world at all? Well, now Christmas Eve, the sermon's supposed to be short and fluffy and a bit inspirational, but not heavy. But I have to tell you that Christmas is heavy. It's heavy. It's life-shattering. It is life-changing. Christmas is about God so loving the world that God gave. God gave and God gave and God gave the gift of Jesus Christ. The reason we give gifts at Christmas is because God gave to us. Our response to the love of God is to love others. And we give gifts as symbols of that. Look at the story of the birth of Christ that was just read to you from Luke's gospel. Where is God at work in that story? I would challenge you to go home tonight. I don't know, some of you may have already eaten before you came here, but if you're going home to eat, reread the birth story, Luke 2, chapter 2, verses 1 through 20, and look at where God is at work in the story of the Nativity. God's at work through nature, the stars, angels, shepherds, the innkeeper, kings, that's in Matthew, but kings, and through a helpless baby and through Mary and Joseph, a little baby that would grow up to change the world. He would grow up to feed the hungry, to heal the sick, to cast out demons, to release those in bondage, to forgive sins, and to give eternal life. God is at work through nature and science. I get tired of there being a division between science and theology and religion. They shouldn't be divided. God's at work in science and through science. We're going to talk about that some in 2014. We're not left to ourselves. There's hope. We have a future, and it's good. I would ask you also to go home tonight and maybe sometime around the table or wherever you can have discussion. Look back over your life. Look back over the last year and ask yourself, where have I seen God at work in the world? Where have I seen God at work in my world, in the world around me? In 1967, a young girl named Johnny she was riding horses near Chesapeake Bay, and she and a couple of friends decided they'd go swimming. And she dived off of a rock into what she thought was deep water. She had been swimming there before, but it was very shallow, and her head hit a rock and broke her neck. She was paralyzed for life. She had a hard time reconciling her accident with the idea of a loving God. Where is God in this? Why at such a young age would a teenage girl be paralyzed for life? And she was angry and she was depressed. Paralysis. One day a friend came to see her and she said, Johnny, has it ever occurred to you that Jesus knows how you feel? Because he was paralyzed. She said, what are you talking about? She said, he was paralyzed on the cross. He couldn't move. He couldn't change positions. He was paralyzed by the nails. And I want you to know God was at work through that one visitor, that friend in her life. Like the light began to come on in her life. And she was able to understand that God is at work in our lives even when we don't see it at first, even when we don't feel it. She began to understand that God is a God of love, even when tragedy strikes in our lives. Do you know that Johnny Erickson married? She's Johnny Erickson Tata. Many of you have read her books. Since that accident, she has become a famous artist, soloist. She's written books, married. She's a motivational speaker. Oh, how God is at work in her life. Sometimes our lives can get so overwhelming and cluttered, it's difficult for us to take the time to reflect and see where God's at work around us at all. Sometimes God is at work in the most trivial things. Now, I hope you don't mind. I'm going to be real personal for a minute and tell you that this past summer I had a dream realized. It's on my bucket list. I've always wanted an old truck. I've always wanted to drive an old truck, and my wife has said no, no, and no. And this summer, I bought one. And it's interesting, when I brought it home, I called her and told her, I said, I've got this. It's a 1988 Ford F-150 that's UGA Bulldog Red. Most beautiful color in the whole world. And it's a 5-speed. And my wife said, it's a 5-speed, I can't drive it. And I said, yes. It's mine. It's mine. It's my truck. And it has a muffler problem, and you can hear me coming from a mile away. And I love it. I love driving it. I'm in hog heaven. I put on my UGA cap and my old blue jeans and everything, and I put the dog in the front seat. And if I chewed tobacco, man, we'd be tight. I mean to tell you, we'd be tight in that thing. It's a great truck. Now let me tell you what happened to me. 2 weeks before the last Sunday in October here, we had Trunk and Treat. Some of you were involved in that. Remember Trunk and Treat here? It was great. 2 weeks before that day, my son came home from Augusta, and he likes to tinker with trucks, and I don't know anything about trucks. I just know I love to drive them. And he said, Dad, your spare tire is not a good spare tire, and I got you a new one. So let's change it. I said, help yourself. So he got under the truck, and this old truck, the spare is underneath the truck, you know. And so he took the spare out, and he put the new one under there, and it didn't fit. And he tried, and then he said, well, Daddy, I got to go back to Augusta. I'll put the spare on the next time I'm home. No spare tire. So there's the old one and the new one, and I didn't think much about it. I drove it around since then, but the Sunday we had Trunk and Treat, I get an old Big Red. I call it Big Red. I got in Big Red, and I drove up to come to church, to Trunk and Treat. Do you know where the intersection is of State Bridge and Medlock Bridge? Where Stony River is? There's a car wash across the street. Well, I was coming up State Bridge, up the hill, and when I got up the hill, about halfway up, I heard this clink, and the most god-awful noise you could ever hear in your whole life. And what it was the metal holder that was to hold that spare tire had come undone, and it was just dragging along. And everybody was turning and looking at me. And I mean, it was the most obnoxious noise you could ever hear. I was so embarrassed. And so I had to stop at the red light, and then I turned, and I went into where the car wash was, and it was so loud that even the customers came out of the car wash. Every employee came out of the car wash, and they surrounded my truck and looked at me, and I said, I don't know, something's wrong underneath it. And this fella jumped up, said, let me look under there. And I said, yeah, you do that. You help yourself. You just go right up under there. And he said, well, your spare tire holder is not in place. And he said, I'm going to put it in. And he did. And I thanked him profusely. We talked. I wanted to take up an offering and, preach a sermon and all that, but I had to get to the church for Trunk and Treat. So I came to Trunk and Treat. The story's not over yet. I went to Trunk and Treat, had a marvelous time, and it was getting dark, and I got in Big Red to go home. I live where the parsonage. You go down Medlock Bridge, turn on Old Alabama, turn right on the Bice Road. Just as I turned on the right on the Bice Road, I heard this clanking noise again, except this time I saw sparks. And I could see all these sparks coming, and the truck was doing this, out of control. And then I looked out, and there was my tire just going down the center of the road. My back tire was going, it was like a bowling ball. And I looked out and I went, well, there goes my tire down the center of the road. It was really a beautiful sight. I wish you'd have seen them. It was right down the yellow line, just straight, going down Bice Road. And then it hit me, oh no, someone could come over the hill and be killed. Oh, how am I going to get the tire? I couldn't even get out of my seatbelt. It was an 88, and it takes forever to get out of the seatbelt. I couldn't even find all of it. And this car sped around me, went way past the tire. I could see it going on down the road. And he pulled over to the side, had two teenage sons, jumped out, and they caught the tire. And they rolled it back to where the truck was, where I was stranded. And I thanked them profusely. They didn't offer to help anymore. They got in the car and left. And and I was just out in the dark with this truck with 3 wheels on it. And I thought to myself, well, it's not a problem. I'm a AAA member. I'll just get my card out. So I get my card out, and you know what hit me? I didn't have any glasses. I couldn't see the number. That tells you my age. And so I turned on the light, and there I am trying to read this number, putting it up to the light. Couldn't see it, so I had to call my wife, who was on her way back from Florida, and confess to her that the wheel had come off the truck that she loves so much. And I said, can you pull over on the side of the road and give me AAA numbers? So she did. I got AAA to come. And then I called a couple who's in this church that live nearby, interrupted their meal, interrupted their lives, and I said, would you come be with me and take me when the tow truck comes to wherever they're going to take my truck? Well, they took it up here to McGinnis Ferry Road. There's a AAA place. By the way, they didn't pay me to do this to tell you there's a AAA place right up here. But anyway, there's AAA place. They had to wait. Took a long time to get on the truck, towed it up there. Then they had to take me back home, and then they had to go home. And then my wife came in, and I said, what a disastrous day. This has just been disastrous. It's been embarrassing. It's been humiliating. And that tire's going to cost me more than I paid for the blooming truck. I'm just going to tell you that. It's probably going to cost more than I paid for the truck. And I was just huffing and puffing and thought it was just horrible. Well, later that evening, when I had my journaling and prayer time and time of reflection, and I began to look back on the day, and I thought of the services we had that Sunday morning and Trunk and Treat and how good it was. And it hit me that I had been around angels unaware. I'd been around the light of the world and hadn't seen it clearly, while those that came out from the car wash to help me were instruments of God. God was at work through them. Those teenage boys, they probably had other places to be, but they climbed out of that car and rolled that tire back to me, and it was a long way. And I was touched by an angel, and I saw the light of God at work. Friends who came and picked me up and stayed with me until the truck was in place and took me back home. When have you been an angel to somebody? When have you been the light of the world to somebody? You see, Christmas is about stars and light and angels. It's about God at work in the world. God is at work in this world in even the simplest and most minute ways. St. Francis of Assisi said, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. An instrument of your peace. Let me live in such a way wherever there's hatred, let me make love happen. Let me sow love, S-O-W, love. Where there's injury, pardon. Where there's doubt, let me bring faith. Where there's sadness, let me bring joy. Where there's darkness, let me be light. Where there's death, let me bring life. God is at work. I want to tell you that during World War II, there was a church in Strasbourg that was destroyed. Everything was destroyed. And when they went through the rubble of it, they didn't think anything was saved, but there was a big statue of Jesus that was fully intact except for one thing. His hands were missing. The hands were destroyed. True story. And so they pulled that statue out and they put it up, and then they cleared out the rubble and they began to rebuild. And a sculptor came into town and saw that statue and went to the pastor of the church and said, I'm a sculptor and I can make those hands. I can put the hands back on Jesus. And the pastor said, well, let me get back with you. And he called a meeting of the elders of the church and said, what should we do? And they said, we want the statue up the way it is. We don't want the hands back on Jesus. Now that may seem odd to you, but you see, that church was right. That statue, they told the sculptor, no thank you. They said our broken statue touches the heart of humanity. But you see, Jesus has no hands to minister to the needy or feed the hungry or enrich the poor except our hands. He inspires, we perform. A woman later wrote the great poem that says, Christ has no hands but our hands to do his work today. He has no feet but our feet to lead us in the way. He has no tongue but our tongue to tell all how he died. He has no help but our help to bring them to his side. We're the only Bible the careless world will read. Let that sink in a minute. We are the sinner's gospel. We are the scoffer's creed. We are the Lord's last message given in word and deed. What if the type is crooked? What if the print is blurred? What if our hands are busy with other work than his? What if our feet are walking where sin's allurement is? What if our tongue is speaking of things his lips would spurn? How can we hope to help him or welcome his return? When we look at the Nativity story, all the characters in it are very important, because God's works through all of them, even the barnyard animals, God is at work. My friends, Christmas is about the realization that God has come to us in love and has given us the gift of Christ so that we may be the gift of Christ to the world. In just a minute, you're going to receive a gift that's going to be in a package like this, and the children get one like this, and it'll be explained to you in a little bit, but I want to show you this real quickly. Every year on Christmas Eve, we give you a gift. It looks like this. You can put it on a keychain. The whole point is for you to put it where it's close to you. And it has the theme for 2014 called God at Work. In 2014, we're going to look at how God is at work through you and me, and how God is at work through the multitudes of ways. Oh, we're going to grow deep in this. But this right here is a toolkit, and we had it made for you. And what I like about it is each of these tools are different. They're all different. Each are important. But you see, they don't work unless they're put in the center like that. And then you can use it. And when I saw this and we talked about it for our gift, I said, I like that because you see, I think God works best through the church, through community, through us. All these tools are together in community. But even community and us together do not work well unless we are centered in Jesus Christ. Unless Christ is at the center of our lives. So I hope that you'll take this little gift, will you? And put it where it will remind you of how you can be an instrument for God. I want to close by saying that Christmas does not end tomorrow at midnight. No. Christmas just begins anew. And may God bless us as we work together in such a way that peace will permeate every inch of the world, where love will reign and God's kingdom will come on earth as it is in heaven. Hear these words of the great Howard Thurman. Listen to these words. When the star in the sky is gone, when the kings and princes are home, when the shepherds are back with their flocks, then the work of Christmas begins. To find the lost, to heal the broken, to feed the hungry, to release the prisoner, to teach the nations, to bring Christ to all, to make music in the heart. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen.